The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead like 1,000 tiny stars, casting their warm glow across the grand ballroom of the Rosewood Hotel. Women in designer gowns glided past marble columns, their jewelry catching the light with every movement. Men in expensive suits stood in small groups discussing business deals and vacation homes. The air smelled of French perfume and old money. In the middle of all this luxury stood Claire Martinez, and she couldn't have looked more out of place if she'd tried. Her dress was simple cotton, a soft blue color that she'd bought on sale 3 years ago. It was clean and pressed, but next to the silk and satin surrounding her, it might as well have been burlap. Her shoes were practical flats, scuffed at the toes from years of wear. She carried a brown leather purse that her mother had given her, its strap slightly frayed at the edges. Claire hadn't come here to impress anyone. She'd come to support her best friend Rebecca, who worked as an event coordinator for the charity hosting tonight's auction. Rebecca had been stressing about this event for months, and Claire wanted to be there for moral support, even if she felt like a fish out of water. She walked slowly along the wall where various auction items were displayed. There were luxury vacation packages to private islands, vintage wine collections worth more than most people's cars, and jewelry that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Claire paused in front of a beautiful painting, a landscape of the Italian countryside at sunset. The colors were breathtaking, can you imagine? A voice said behind her, dripping with amusement. They'll let just anyone in these days. Claire turned slightly and saw 3 women standing a few feet away. They were all around her age, maybe early 30s, but that's where any similarity ended. The tallest one wore a red dress that probably cost more than Claire made in 6 months. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves and diamonds hung from her ears. The woman next to her was equally polished, her black dress hugging her thin frame. Designer sunglasses perched on top of her dark hair even though they were indoors. The third woman wore emerald green, her auburn hair pulled back in an elegant twist. The woman in red was staring directly at Claire, not even trying to hide it. Her 2 friends giggled behind their champagne glasses. Claire turned back to the painting, trying to ignore them. She'd dealt with people like this before. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, she'd learned early that some people judged you by your clothes before they ever heard you speak. I mean, really? The woman in red continued, louder now. This is supposed to be an exclusive event. Did security not get the memo? Maybe she's here to serve drinks, the woman in black suggested, her voice mockingly sweet. Though I'd expect even the staff to dress better than that. The third woman laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the gentle classical music playing in the background. Or maybe she saw the word charity and thought it meant they were giving things away for free. Claire's cheeks burned. She kept her eyes on the painting, but the words stung like tiny paper cuts. She could feel other people starting to notice, conversations around them dropping to whispers as guests turned to see what was happening. That purse, the woman in red said, loud enough for half the room to hear. Is that vintage? Or just old? Her friends erupted in laughter. Claire gripped her mother's purse a little tighter. This purse had been through everything with her. It had been with her through college finals, job interviews, her mother's funeral. It meant more to her than all the designer bags in this room combined. Victoria, be nice, the woman in green said, but she was still smiling. Maybe she's someone's assistant. You know how these tech people are, always bringing their help to events. Victoria, the woman in red, walked closer to Claire. She had that confident stride of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Excuse me, she said, tapping Claire on the shoulder. I think you might be in the wrong place. The service entrance is around back. Claire finally turned to face her. She met Victoria's eyes calmly, even though her heart was pounding. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, she said quietly. I was invited. Invited? Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up. By whom? That's none of your business. The woman in black moved closer, flanking Claire on the other side. Oh, she's got an attitude. How cute. Listen, sweetie, this event has a certain standard. Look around. Do you see anyone else dressed like they're going to the grocery store? I'm dressed appropriately, Claire said, keeping her voice steady. And I'm here to support the charity, just like everyone else. Support the charity? Victoria laughed. What are you planning to bid on? The appetizers? More people were watching now. Claire could see them out of the corner of her eye, some looking uncomfortable, others clearly enjoying the drama. A few had their phones out. Nobody stepped forward to help. Where was Rebecca? She'd said she'd be near the front, coordinating with the auctioneer. Claire wished desperately that her friend would appear, but the ballroom was huge and packed with people. The third woman, the one in green, pulled out her own phone. This is actually fascinating. A social experiment. What happens when someone completely out of their depth crashes high society? Put the phone away, Natasha, Victoria said, though she was smiling. We don't want to embarrass the poor thing too much. She's probably already planning her exit. I'm not going anywhere, Claire said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. I have every right to be here. Rights? Victoria's smile turned cold. Honey, rights don't mean much in the real world. This is about belonging, about class, about knowing where you fit. She gestured at Claire's dress. And you clearly don't fit here. A small crowd had gathered now, forming a loose circle around them. Claire felt trapped like an animal in a zoo. Her face was hot, her hands trembling slightly. She wanted nothing more than to walk out of this ballroom and never come back. But something stubborn inside her refused to give these women the satisfaction. The auction's about to start, she said instead. Maybe you should find your seats. Oh, we have seats, the woman in black said, gesturing toward the front of the room. Front row, actually. Reserved for the major donors. You know, the people who actually matter. She looked Claire up and down. I'm guessing you'll be somewhere in the back, if they let you stay at all. Victoria leaned in closer, her expensive perfume overwhelming. Here's some free advice, since you look like you could use it. This world isn't for everyone. Some people are meant to serve, and some people are meant to be served. It's not mean, it's just reality. The sooner you accept which category you're in, the happier you'll be. Claire opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. What could she say? These women had already decided who she was based on her dress and her purse. Nothing she said would change their minds. Come on, Natasha said to her friends. We're wasting our time. Let's get good seats before the real guests take them all. The three women walked away, their heels clicking on the marble floor, their laughter floating behind them. The crowd dispersed slowly, some people shooting Claire sympathetic looks, others quickly averting their eyes. Claire stood alone in front of the Italian sunset painting, her hand still gripping her mother's purse. She took a deep breath, then another. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't give them that. From across the room, she could hear the auctioneer calling everyone to their seats. The auction was about to begin. Claire straightened her shoulders and walked toward the seating area. She found a chair in the very back row, far from the judging eyes and cruel whispers. But as she sat down, she couldn't help wondering if maybe Victoria was right. Maybe some people just didn't belong in places like this. The auction hall had transformed in minutes. What had been a space for mingling and showing off was now arranged in neat rows of velvet chairs, all facing a raised platform where the auctioneer stood behind a wooden podium. Behind him, a massive screen displayed each item as it came up for bidding. Claire settled into her seat in the back row, trying to make herself as small as possible. The chair next to her remained empty, which was fine with her. The fewer people who noticed her, the better. 3 rows from the front, she could see Victoria and her friends taking their seats, laughing about something. They looked so comfortable here, so perfectly at home. Victoria waved to someone across the room, her diamond bracelet catching the light. The woman in black, whose name Claire still didn't know, was taking selfies with Natasha, both of them pouting for the camera. Claire pulled out her phone, hoping Rebecca might have texted, but there was nothing. Her friend was probably running around backstage, making sure everything was perfect. Claire sent her a quick message. I'm here. In the back. Good luck with everything. The lights dimmed slightly and the room fell quiet. The auctioneer, a distinguished man with silver hair and a crisp British accent, welcomed everyone to the annual Thornfield Charity Gala. He spoke about the cause they were supporting tonight, a children's hospital that provided free care to families who couldn't afford it. Claire felt a little better knowing that at least the money raised tonight would go to something good, even if the people in this room were awful. The first items went quickly. A weekend at a ski resort in Switzerland went for each $1,000. A collection of rare wines sold for $65,000. Each time the gavel came down, polite applause rippled through the audience. Claire watched in amazement at the casual way people threw around money that could change her entire life. Next up, the auctioneer announced, we have a truly special piece. A vintage Rolex watch once owned by a Hollywood legend. We'll start the bidding at $50,000. Paddles went up immediately. Claire watched as the price climbed higher and higher. 70,000, 85,000, 110,000. Finally, it sold to a man in the front row for $130,000. He looked pleased with himself, as if he'd gotten a bargain. Claire couldn't imagine spending that much money on a watch. Her entire car had cost $3,000, and she'd thought that was expensive. The auction continued. A painting sold for $200,000. A private jet experience for the weekend went for $350,000. Claire stopped paying attention to the prices. They'd stopped meaning anything to her. These numbers existed in a different universe than the one she lived in. Then the auctioneer's voice changed, becoming more excited. Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the crown jewel of tonight's auction. I must ask for your complete attention. The lights dimmed further and a spotlight illuminated the screen behind him. A collective gasp went through the audience. On the screen was a necklace that looked like it had fallen from the stars themselves. Diamonds arranged in an intricate pattern caught the light from every angle, creating a cascade of sparkle that seemed almost magical. At the center hung a single blue diamond the size of a grape, so perfectly cut that it seemed to glow from within. The Meridian necklace, the auctioneer said reverently, crafted in 1889 by the master jeweler Leopold Cartier himself. This piece has been in a private collection for over a century. The blue diamond at its center is one of only 12 in the world of this quality. The necklace contains 347 diamonds in total. He paused for effect. We will open the bidding at $500,000. The room erupted in excited murmurs. Victoria and her friends had their heads together, whispering frantically. Several other women were leaning forward in their seats, eyes fixed on the screen like hawks watching prey. Claire stared at the necklace. It was beautiful. There was no denying that. But $500,000? For something you wore around your neck? It seemed insane. That money could pay for college educations, buy houses, save lives at the hospital this charity supported. Do I have $500,000? The auctioneer called out. Several paddles went up. The auctioneer pointed to someone in the third row. $500,000 to paddle number 47. Do I hear 550? Another paddle. $550,000 to paddle number 12. Claire watched, fascinated despite herself. She'd never seen anything like this. The paddle numbers being called out, the quick back and forth, the tension building in the room. $600,000 to paddle number 83. The woman in black, sitting next to Victoria, leaned over and whispered something. Victoria shook her head firmly. Natasha looked disappointed. $650,000, the auctioneer continued. Do I hear 700,000? The room had gone quiet. This was serious money now, even for this crowd. Claire could feel the tension, everyone waiting to see who would claim the prize. Without really thinking about it, Claire raised her paddle. It happened so fast she barely realized what she was doing. Her hand just went up, holding the small numbered paddle she'd been given when she checked in. The paddle she'd forgotten was even in her lap. The room fell absolutely silent. Every head turned toward the back. Hundreds of eyes landed on Claire, sitting alone in her cotton dress and worn shoes, her paddle held high. The auctioneer looked confused. He consulted with an assistant, checking something on his tablet. I apologize, do we have a bid from paddle number 114? Claire's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. What had she just done? She couldn't afford this necklace. She couldn't afford a fake version of this necklace. She couldn't even afford to look at pictures of this necklace. But something had snapped inside her when she saw Victoria and her friends whispering. When she remembered their cruel words. When she felt the weight of everyone in this room thinking she didn't belong. A wild, reckless part of her brain had decided to raise that paddle, and now it was too late to take it back. Yes, Claire heard herself say, her voice carrying across the silent room. $700,000. The silence lasted another beat, then another. Then from the front of the room came a sound that made Claire's blood run cold. Victoria was laughing. It started as a chuckle, then grew into full-throated laughter that echoed off the marble walls. She turned in her seat to stare at Claire, her face a mixture of disbelief and cruel amusement. Are you serious? Victoria called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. You can't actually be serious right now. The woman in black stood up, turning to get a better look at Claire. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Does she even know how much money $700,000 is? Natasha had her phone out, recording. This is gold. Pure gold. Other people were starting to murmur, some laughing, others looking uncomfortable. The auctioneer cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should... No, let's see this play out, Victoria interrupted, walking into the aisle so she could address the whole room. I mean, look at her. She gestured toward Claire. That dress probably cost $40. Those shoes look like they came from a discount store, and she's trying to bid $700,000 on a diamond necklace. Claire felt her face burning. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the paddle. Everyone was staring, some with pity, some with amusement, some with outright disdain. This is embarrassing, the woman in black said, shaking her head. Someone should stop this before it gets worse. Does she even have $700, let alone $700,000? Victoria pulled out her phone. I'm recording this. When she can't pay, when they have to call security and escort her out, I want to have proof that this actually happened. My followers will love this. Wait, Natasha said, moving closer to Claire's row. Maybe we should give her a chance to explain herself. Tell us, what do you do for a living? What could you possibly do that would let you afford a necklace like that? Claire's mind was racing. She'd made a terrible mistake. She should never have raised that paddle. She should grab her purse and run right now before this got any worse. The auctioneer was conferring with several staff members. Security guards had appeared near the exits. Claire could see Rebecca pushing through the crowd, her face pale with worry. I've got an idea, Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Why don't you prove you can afford it? Show us your bank account. Show us anything that suggests you're not wasting everyone's time right now. The crowd had moved closer, forming a tight circle around Claire's seat. She felt trapped, suffocated by all the staring eyes and judging faces. This is a legitimate auction, someone called out from the middle of the room. If she can't prove she has the funds, she should be removed. Absolutely, another voice agreed. This is fraud. She's disrupting the entire event. The woman in black stepped even closer. Last chance. Admit you made a mistake, apologize, and leave quietly. Otherwise, this is going to get very ugly for you. Claire looked at all the faces surrounding her. Rich, powerful, confident faces. People who'd never been doubted, never been mocked for their appearance, never had to prove they belonged somewhere. 2 security guards were making their way toward her now, moving through the crowd with purpose. Victoria's smile was triumphant. I told you, some people just don't belong in places like this. They try to play in a world they don't understand and they end up humiliating themselves. The guards reached Claire's row. One of them, a tall man with kind eyes, spoke gently. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. Claire stood up, her legs shaky. She clutched her mother's purse to her chest. The walk to the exit would be the longest of her life. Past all these people, past Victoria's mocking smile, past her own shattered dignity. She'd taken one step into the aisle when the main doors to the ballroom burst open. The doors didn't just open. They flew open with such force that they slammed against the marble walls, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent ballroom like a thunderclap. Every head whipped toward the entrance. The security guards froze mid-step. Victoria's smirk faltered. Even the auctioneer stopped mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. A man stood in the doorway, and the air in the room seemed to change. He was tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, wearing a suit that made every other suit in the room look like a cheap costume. But it wasn't the suit that commanded attention. It was the way he carried himself, the absolute confidence in every movement, the sense that this man could buy and sell everyone in this ballroom without checking his bank balance. Behind him stood 4 people. 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, clearly security, a woman in a business suit carrying a leather briefcase, and another man with a tablet, furiously. Typing something. The man in front walked into the ballroom like he owned it. Maybe he did. Claire had never seen him before, but something about him felt familiar, comforting even in a way she couldn't explain. His eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. The crowd surrounding Claire, the security guards, Victoria with her phone still raised, recording. Then his gaze landed on Claire herself, and his entire expression changed. The cold authority melted into something softer. Concern, relief, and something else that Claire couldn't quite identify. He walked straight toward her, the crowd parting before him like water. Nobody tried to stop him. Nobody dared. Michael, Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. But in the dead silence of the ballroom, everyone heard it. The man reached Claire in seconds. He gently took her hands in his, and Claire saw that they were shaking. He looked at her face, at the tears threatening to spill from her eyes, at the humiliation and fear written in every line of her expression. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said quietly, his voice deep and warm. Traffic was worse than expected. Then he turned to face the crowd, keeping one arm protectively around Claire's shoulders. "Good evening," he said, his voice filling the room effortlessly. "For those who don't know me, my name is Michael Chen. Some of you might recognize the name from the technology sector." A wave of whispers rushed through the crowd like wind through grass. Claire saw faces changing, eyes widening, mouths falling open. Several people pulled out their phones, frantically typing. Victoria had gone pale. Her phone hung limply in her hand, forgotten. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance," Michael continued, his tone polite but with an edge of steel underneath. "I wasn't planning to attend tonight. My wife and I prefer to keep a low profile at these events, but when my assistant informed me about a situation developing here, I felt it was important to come in person." His wife. He'd said wife. The woman with the briefcase stepped forward, opening it to reveal documents. She handed them to the auctioneer, who looked like he might faint. "Those are verification of funds," Michael said. "More than sufficient to cover any bids my wife might wish to make tonight. The transfer can be completed immediately if needed." The auctioneer looked at the documents, his hands trembling slightly. Whatever he saw there made his eyes go wide. "Yes, Mr. Chen, everything appears to be in order. More than in order. I apologize for any confusion." Michael nodded, then turned his attention to Victoria and her friends. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made all three women take a step back. "I couldn't help but notice," he said carefully, "that my wife was being harassed. Would someone care to explain what was happening here?" Nobody spoke. The silence was deafening. "No." Michael looked around the room. "No one wants to explain why my wife, who was minding her own business, was surrounded by security and being threatened with removal?" Victoria found her voice, though it came out shaky. We didn't know. She didn't say she shouldn't have to." Michael interrupted, his voice sharp now. "Claire shouldn't have to explain herself to anyone here. But since we're all interested in explanations, let me provide some context." He gestured to the woman with the briefcase. She pulled out another document and handed it to the auctioneer. "What you're holding," Michael said to the room, "is confirmation of a donation made to the Thornfield charity 6 weeks ago. $10 million. The donor was listed as anonymous per my wife's request. Claire doesn't like attention. She doesn't like praise. She simply wanted to help children who need medical care." The auctioneer read the document, then read it again, his face cycling through expressions of shock, confusion, and finally understanding. "I can confirm," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom, "that this donation was received. It is, in fact, the largest single contribution in the history of our organization." The crowd erupted into chaos. People shouting questions, phones being raised to take photos. A general surge forward to get closer to Claire and Michael. Michael held up a hand, and somehow, impossibly, everyone quieted down. "My wife," he continued, "has donated more money to charitable causes than most of you will earn in your lifetimes. She's funded schools, hospitals, women's shelters, and food banks. She does this quietly, without seeking recognition, because that's who she is." He looked directly at Victoria now. "She also happens to have better judgment of character than I do. 15 years ago, when I was nobody, when I was living in a tiny apartment and eating ramen for every meal while trying to build my first company, Claire believed in me. She supported me. She worked 2 jobs so I could focus on my business. Every success I've had, every company I've built, every dollar I've earned, I owe to her belief in me." Claire felt tears sliding down her cheeks now, but they weren't tears of humiliation anymore. Michael squeezed her hand gently. "So when I heard," he said, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "that my wife was being mocked for her appearance, for her clothes, for daring to exist in the same space as people who judge worth by the price tags on dresses and the names on purses, I felt it was important to come here and make a few things clear." He pulled out his own phone, tapping something on the screen. The massive display behind the auctioneer suddenly changed, showing what looked like a news article. "Victoria Ashworth," Michael read from the screen, "socialite and board member of several charitable organizations. Also, coincidentally, the wife of Gregory Ashworth, CEO of Ashworth Dynamics." Victoria had gone from pale to green. She looked like she might be sick. Ashworth Dynamics, Michael continued, has been in negotiations with Chen Industries for the past 6 months, a contract worth approximately $200 million, which would have secured their company's future for the next decade. He tapped his phone again. Those negotiations ended about 5 minutes ago. My lawyers just sent the termination notice. Victoria made a strangled sound. Several people in the crowd gasped. Gregory Ashworth himself was at this event, Claire realized, seeing a red-faced man standing near the bar looking absolutely stricken. Michael wasn't finished. He gestured to the woman in black. I'm sorry, I don't believe we've been introduced. Diana Rothschild, the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. Rothschild? Related to the Rothschild Gallery downtown? Diana nodded, looking like she wanted to disappear. Interesting, Michael said. The gallery that's been struggling since the pandemic. The one that recently applied for a significant loan from Pacific Trust Bank. Diana's face crumpled. Please. Pacific Trust Bank, Michael continued, which Chen Holdings acquired last month. I make it a point to personally review any loans over a certain amount. I'll be paying special attention to yours. He turned to Natasha, who was trying to blend into the crowd. And you. Natasha Kensington, correct? I recognize you from the society pages. You sit on the board of the Metro Children's Fund, the Women's Health Coalition, and the Arts Council. Natasha nodded weakly. 3 organizations, Michael said, that receive substantial funding from the Chen Foundation. In fact, I believe my foundation is the primary benefactor for all 3. He let that hang in the air for a moment. I'll be requesting emergency board meetings for all 3 organizations to discuss whether their current board members truly represent the values of compassion, dignity, and respect that these charities are supposed to embody. Natasha's phone clattered to the floor. She didn't bend to pick it up. Michael looked around the room, making eye contact with dozens of people, all of whom suddenly found reasons to look away. Let me be very clear, he said. My wife's worth is not determined by her clothing. It's not determined by her accessories. It's not determined by anything you can see from the outside. Claire is worth more than anyone in this room, and I include myself in that assessment. He turned to the auctioneer. The necklace. I believe my wife bid $700,000. The auctioneer nodded frantically. Yes, sir? Does anyone wish to bid higher? The silence was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Going once, the auctioneer said quickly. Going twice. Sold to Paddle 114 for $700,000. Michael nodded to his assistant, who immediately started typing on his tablet. The payment will be processed within the hour. He looked down at Claire, his expression softening. Did you want the necklace, sweetheart? Or were you just making a point? Claire found her voice finally. Making a point, she admitted quietly. Michael smiled, a real smile that lit up his entire face. That's my girl. He turned back to the crowd one last time. We'll be leaving now. Claire and I have better things to do than spend our evening with people who measure worth in dollar signs. But before we go, I want to make one more thing clear. He pulled Claire closer. The next time anyone in this room or anyone anywhere treats my wife with anything less than the respect she deserves, there will be consequences. I built my companies from nothing, and I can dismantle careers just as easily. That's not a threat, it's a promise. The room remained silent as Michael guided Claire toward the door. His security team formed a protective circle around them. The woman with the briefcase followed, still carrying her documents. As they reached the exit, Claire heard a commotion behind them. Katoria was arguing with her husband, their voices carrying across the ballroom. Diana was crying. Natasha stood alone, watching her entire social circle move away from her like she had a contagious disease. Claire should have felt vindicated, triumphant. These women had been cruel, and now they were facing consequences. But as the cool night air hit her face outside the hotel, she just felt tired. The limousine was waiting at the curb, sleek and black and totally unnecessary. Michael opened the door for Claire, and she slid into the leather interior gratefully, her legs finally giving out after holding her up through the most surreal hour of her life. Michael climbed in after her, and the door closed, muffling the chaos behind them. Through the tinted windows, Claire could see people streaming out of the hotel, phones pressed to their ears, animated conversations happening on the sidewalk. The story was already spreading. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Michael poured 2 glasses of water from the car's bar, handing one to Claire. She drank it gratefully, realizing her mouth was completely dry. "I'm sorry," she finally said. Michael looked at her in surprise. "Sorry, Claire, what could you possibly be sorry for?" "For causing a scene. For raising that paddle. I don't know what I was thinking. I just—" She trailed off, not sure how to explain the impulse that had made her bid on a necklace worth more than some houses. "You were defending yourself," Michael said gently. "You were standing up for yourself. That's nothing to apologize for. But now there's going to be articles and photos and people talking about us. You hate that kind of attention." "We both do." Michael took her hand. "I hate it when it's meaningless attention. When it's paparazzi camping outside our house or reporters asking what I eat for breakfast. But this, Claire, what happened in there was important, was it?" Claire looked down at their joined hands. "I feel like I just made everything worse. That woman, Victoria, she lost her husband's business contract. That other woman might not get her loan. And Natasha might lose her board positions on organizations she clearly doesn't care about," Michael finished. "Claire, listen to me. What I did in there wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences." He shifted in his seat to face her fully. "Do you know how many meetings I take every year? Hundreds. And in every single one I'm treated with respect. Not because I'm a good person, but because I have money and power. People are nice to me because they want something from me." "That's not true." "It is true," he interrupted gently. "And it's fine. I understand how business works. But you know what I realized tonight? Those same people who smile at me and shake my hand, who call me sir and offer me the best tables at restaurants, would have treated you the same way Victoria did if they thought they could get away with it." Claire thought about that. About the faces in the crowd, some laughing, some looking away, none of them helping. "They judge people who they think are beneath them," Michael continued. "They're cruel to servers and janitors and anyone who doesn't meet their definition of important. And they get away with it because those people don't have the power to fight back. But I do have that power," Claire said slowly, understanding. "Because I'm married to you." "No," Michael said firmly. "You have that power because of who you are. Because you're smart and kind and strong. I just made sure everyone else could see it too." The car started moving, gliding smoothly through the city streets. Claire watched the lights pass by outside, trying to process everything that had happened. "What's going to happen to them?" she asked. "Victoria and the others?" Michael was quiet for a moment. "That depends on them. Victoria's husband will probably lose that contract. His company will struggle. But they're not going to go bankrupt. They'll survive. As for Diana's loan, I'll review it fairly. If her gallery is a good investment, she might still get it. And Natasha can keep her board positions if she learns something from this." "What do you mean?" "I'm not actually going to destroy their lives, Claire. I'm not a monster. But I am going to make sure they understand that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people like garbage just because you think they don't matter." He smiled slightly. "I've already had my assistant reach out to all 3 of them. They each have a choice. They can make public apologies not just to you but to everyone they've treated poorly. They can volunteer at the charities they claim to support. They can actually learn what it means to be a decent human being. And if they don't, then yes, the consequences will be severe. But that's their choice to make." Claire nodded slowly. It seemed fair, actually. More fair than she might have been if their positions were reversed. "What about the necklace?" she asked. "What are we going to do with a $700,000 necklace?" Michael laughed. A real laugh that made Claire smile despite everything. "I have some ideas about that. But first, there's something else we need to address." He pulled out his tablet, tapping through several screens. "While I was giving my speech in there, my team was doing some digging. It turns out that auction isn't the only place where my wife has been treated poorly." Claire's stomach sank. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Michael said carefully, "that I just found out about a certain boutique on 5th Avenue where you were followed around by security guards last month. And a restaurant where the host tried to turn you away because they didn't think you looked appropriate for their establishment. And a charity event not unlike tonight, where someone suggested you were only invited as someone's +1, not in your own right." Claire felt her face burning. "How did you— I have people who keep an eye on things, particularly things involving my wife's well-being. Why didn't you tell me about any of this?" "Because it's embarrassing," Claire admitted. "Because I thought maybe they were right." Maybe I don't belong in those places. Maybe I should dress better or act different or maybe, Michael interrupted, his voice sharp. Those places should be better. Claire, you're one of the kindest, most generous people I know. You've donated millions to help others. You volunteer at the food bank every Saturday. You spend your time actually making the world better, not just throwing money at problems and posting about it on social media. He pulled up something on his tablet and showed it to her. It was a photo, one Claire had never seen before. She was at the food bank wearing jeans and a t-shirt, laughing with one of the other volunteers while sorting cans of soup. My assistant took this last week, Michael said. She was dropping something off for you and saw you working. She said you'd been there for 5 hours already, and you stayed another 2 after she left. Claire shrugged. They needed help. We were short-staffed. Exactly, Michael said. While Victoria and her friends were probably at a spa or shopping for their next designer handbag, you were actually helping people. But because you don't dress like them or talk like them, they think you're less than them. And that's not just wrong, Claire. It's disgusting. The car pulled up to their house, a beautiful but not ostentatious home in a quiet neighborhood. They'd chosen it specifically because it didn't scream wealth. Because their neighbors were teachers and nurses and small business owners, normal people living normal lives. Inside, Michael made tea while Claire changed out of the dress that had caused so much drama. She put on soft pajama pants and one of Michael's old college sweatshirts. Comfortable clothes that felt like a hug. They sat together on the couch, tea cooling in their hands. Neither of them quite ready to talk about the evening yet. Finally, Michael broke the silence. I've been thinking about what you said earlier about making things worse. Claire waited. I don't think you made anything worse. I think you exposed something that was already there. All that cruelty, all that judgment, it already existed. You just made it visible. Is that a good thing? I think so, Michael said thoughtfully. Because now we can address it. Not just with Victoria and her friends, but with the bigger problem they represent. He set down his tea and pulled out his phone. I'm going to make some changes. Starting with every company and organization I'm connected to. Mandatory training on respect and dignity. Anonymous reporting systems for staff who experience discrimination or harassment. And real consequences for people who abuse their power. That's a lot of work, Claire said quietly. It's necessary work, and I should have done it years ago. He looked at her seriously. You know what the worst part of tonight was? Not the way they treated you, awful as that was. It was realizing that this probably happens every day to hundreds of people, and I've been too comfortable in my privilege to notice. Claire leaned against his shoulder. You're a good man, Michael Chen. I'm trying to be, but I can be better. We both can. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the trauma of the evening starting to fade into something more manageable. So, Claire said eventually, a hint of mischief in her voice. About that necklace, Michael grinned. I thought you'd bring that up. What do you want to do with it? Honestly, I don't want it. I never wanted it. I just wanted to prove a point. I figured as much. So here's what I'm thinking. Michael pulled up another screen on his phone. The auction was for charity, right? What if we bought the necklace, then donated it back to be auctioned again? All proceeds go to the children's hospital. Claire's eyes widened. We could do that. We can do whatever we want. But there's more. What if we matched whatever it sells for the second time? So if it goes for another $700,000, we donate $700,000 more? That's over $1 million just for one necklace, Claire said, slightly stunned. Pocket change, Michael said dismissively. But imagine what the hospital could do with that money. How many kids they could help. How many families they could support. Claire thought about it. Thought about children getting the medical care they needed. Thought about families not having to choose between treatment and bankruptcy. Let's do it, she said firmly. And let's make sure everyone knows it was your idea. I don't want people thinking I'm trying to make myself look good after what happened tonight. Our idea, Michael corrected. We're a team, remember? Later that night, lying in bed, Claire's phone buzzed. It was Rebecca, her friend from the auction, the one who had gotten her into this mess in the first place. The message read, Are you okay? I just saw what happened. I'm so sorry I couldn't get to you sooner. The whole thing was chaos. Call me when you can, Claire smiled and typed back, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Let's have coffee tomorrow and I'll tell you everything. Also, I might have accidentally bid $700K on a necklace. Rebecca's response came immediately. You what? Claire laughed, the sound surprising her. Just hours ago, she'd been humiliated, surrounded by mocking faces and cruel words. Now she was lying in her comfortable bed, her husband beside her, making plans to help sick children and change corporate culture. "What's funny?" Michael asked sleepily. "Just thinking about how this day turned out," Claire said. "This morning I was worried about what to wear to the auction. Tonight we're planning systemic changes to address wealth inequality and discrimination." Michael chuckled. "That's pretty much how our entire relationship has gone. I plan something small, you turn it into something meaningful. We balance each other out. That we do."